We've touched briefly on why we need supercomputers, and in this morsel we will explore some examples that hopefully clarify the need for supercomputing specifically. Remember that the main application for HPC and supercomputing is large-scale numerical computations. For the cool kids, that's called number crunching. Here, we aren't talking big number calculations, like taking the sum of every person's salary in South Africa, which is a couple of million numbers. That's a big number, but honestly, any general purpose computer or calculator can probably do that calculation, even if it might only take a few minutes. What we really mean is truly large-scale calculations are the exclusive domain of supercomputers. To illustrate the difference between a large number of calculations and large-scale calculations, we're going to take that example of taking the sum of all the population's salaries and calculating that on a normal desktop. This sounds like a large number when you take into account perhaps we've got a population of 50 million people with a salary range of any random number from 0 if they're unemployed to 2 million rand, which is just an arbitrary cap. Looking at this sample here, we calculated 50 million salaries and it took just under 2 minutes to calculate. So we'll run that code again and we'll talk about what the code does. We've assigned the population to 50 times a million, which is 5 times 10 to the power of 7, and we increment a counter after every step in the loop, where we generate a random salary from 0 to 2 million and we add it to the total for salaries. And if the count is a multiple of 5 million, it'll output the current count. So you can see we've got 5 million and 10 million, and it'll continue to count until it reaches the 50 million, at which point it'll exit the loop, calculate the time taken to compute, and then put it out in a human readable format. Take a look at the code on the right. This is for a population of 5 million. The 5 million salaries took a fraction of a minute. In fact, it took 13 seconds. And this is on a single core Jupyter Notebook instance. Not particularly powerful, not particularly fancy. I haven't implemented any parallel coding here. This is straightforward, very simple serial code. Reaching the end of the calculation of 50 million, you can see a larger number here than is in the 5 million population, which is what you'd expect. And it took 2.5 minutes, 150 seconds. To take it a step further, I ran the same code again, but for a population of 500 million. We see that it took just under 12 minutes to calculate 500 million salaries. So hopefully that illustrates that even when there is a large number of calculations, modern computers, even the simple desktops and laptops single-core systems, are capable of doing large numbers of calculations, particularly trivial ones such as this, which is essentially generating random numbers, performing multiplications, additions, and divisions. So imagine the scale of the calculations and the nature of those calculations which require such powerful and expensive machines, and even those machines themselves can take hours or days to complete those calculations. Now, let's talk about that elephant in the room. Why do we even need to do simulations in the first place? The classic Renaissance scientists just dropped cannonballs from high-rise buildings. Well, smashing atoms, much less at the speed of light, is probably not something that most physics students would be able to do in their labs. And we certainly can't have meteorologists, or rather, they shouldn't be allowed to, fiddle with our weather systems to study climate change. The bottom line is we need robust scientific models to simulate these things in a cost-effective and safe environment. Now, I once had to develop an AI algorithm to navigate a spacecraft through an asteroid field. We have hundreds of asteroids of different sizes, velocities, and trajectory flying past each other. They might not be colliding and shooting off each other in different directions, but that is possible. This is a simple example. The spacecraft that I designed had to fly safely through this field without colliding with any of the random chunks of rocks. The craft would receive regular measurement updates of the asteroids with some measurement noise and would need to somehow predict the behavior of every single asteroid in the field of view and outside the field of view in a manner that would allow this craft to reliably know what its pathway would look like moments of time into the future. And it did this using something called Kalman filters. A single core machine could run this code in less than a second to navigate this craft. Imagine the scale of the problem that we really need that would push a massive multi-core, multi-CPU machine that would take hours, days, weeks, or even months to compute. When we talk about truly large-scale simulations, we are not even talking about tremendously complicated calculations. Most of the time, they can be relatively simple numerical calculations that just happen at such a massive scale. Another very significant difference between supercomputers and general-purpose computers is the sheer scale of the resources. We are talking typically hundreds or even 1,000 times more memory and storage than a standard desktop or laptop computer. The single rack of Ranger shown earlier at Wits University has 1.5 terabytes of RAM. That's 1,500 gigabytes of RAM. Whereas a decent laptop nowadays at the high end will have 16 gigs of RAM. The Ranger rack has 100 times as much RAM. And the actual Ranger system consisted of more than 80 such racks. So the full system had in excess of 120 terabytes of RAM. And its roughly 3,900 systems total just shy of 63,000 processor cores. What's really going to make you cry is that this was only the 7th most powerful computer in the world at the time, and this system now is over 10 years old, which I'm sure you'll appreciate that in general computer terms, but especially in HPC terms, it is ancient. This system was actually decommissioned more than 7 years ago, and that is why part of the system is sitting at universities such as Wits. By now you should appreciate the tremendous gap between maybe a couple of hundred desktop computers sitting in a computer lab and the literally hundreds or even thousands of high-end compute servers that typically make up an HPC data center. But building and assembling the massive number of computers is only half the battle towards achieving a functional and effective HPC system. The secret to supercomputing is in the ability to do parallel computing. This means they can perform many tasks at the same time, like having 1,000 general-purpose computers working together at the same time on the same problem. And we will look into the nuances of parallel computing in a later chapter.